Acharya ji Pranam. On being asked, how is dhyan practiced? With eyes open or closed? Ramana Maharshi says, it may be done either way. The point is that the mind must be introverted and kept active in its pursuit. The main factor in dhyan is to keep the mind active in its own pursuit without taking in external impressions or thinking of other matters. Comes the question. Acharya ji, for the human beings of this day and age, which dhyan is more suitable? And as one keeps his eyes open, there is the external world that attracts. And when one keeps his eyes closed, there is the internal world of thoughts and memories that takes up the whole space. Then how to really stay attentive in dhyan? A few clarifications. There are not several kinds of dhyan. Dhyan is on the several kinds and types and diversities and divisions that there are. Not getting it? Are there several kinds of light? Oh, forget that arbitrary distinction in terms of colors, etc. Let light be defined as that which enables you to see. Now, are there several kinds of light? But when there is light, you are able to tell apart the various kinds of everything. Things have kinds. Light does not have kinds. Things are various. Light has no varieties. So you are asking, which kind of dhyan is more apt for this time and age? I am saying dhyan does not have kinds. In dhyan, you are able to tell apart one kind of anything from the other. Are you getting it? Dhyan is not an object. Dhyan is not a thing. Dhyan is not a routine, not a practice, not an exercise. Dhyan rather is on all these things. Dhyan is what enables you to know and see all these properly. Dhyan is not one of these things. Dhyan is that which enables you to know and see these things. It's a very common and a very harmful misconception to take dhyan as something. Dhyan is nothing. Dhyan is on something or the other, this or that. I'm talking of dhyan that negates. I'm talking of dhyan that negates, because the first step obviously is negation. Dhyan that negates must focus itself on the object to be negated, obviously, otherwise how will the negation happen? So dhyan looks at stuff and looks sharply at stuff to know what stuff really is. When dhyan looks sharply at stuff to know what stuff really is, stuff disappears and reality shines. I looked at the wall to know the reality of the wall. And if the looking is honest, then the wall disappears and the reality remains. I started off with the wall. I ended with reality. The wall disappeared and so did the perceiver of the wall. All that remained is non-dual reality in which neither the wall nor the perceiver of the wall are separate anymore. The wall is gone, the I that is perceiving the wall too is gone, only the non-dual light remains, sans any distinction, sans any kind or variety or separation. Be very clear about what dhyan is. Getting it? Now, he's saying, if the eyes are kept open, then there is the world that attracts. If the eyes are kept closed, then there is the inner world of thoughts and memories. Then how to practice dhyan? That's the query. If you keep the eyes open, then you see the world. The world is meaningful to you. Dhyan is to probe those meanings. If you keep your eyes closed, then you have thoughts and images and memories. They are again meaningful to you, that's why they occur to you. Dhyan is to probe those meanings. You see what Raman Maharshi is saying. The main factor in dhyan is to keep the mind active in its own pursuit, within quotes. The main factor in dhyan is to keep the mind active in its own pursuit. What does the mind want? Peace, or truth, or dissolution. The mind wants to reach a finality, an ending, a summit, a closure, a peace. That's what the mind wants. But the mind is not standing in a neutral or unbiased situation. The mind's position is already biased. Mind wants peace, and the mind thinks that that which appears in front of the eyes can probably offer peace. That's the reason why we are so enamored to the world, aren't we? The mind wants peace, and the mind feels that the imagination that occurs when the eyes are closed, or the dreams that occur when the eyes are closed, can offer peace. That's why we dream and imagine so much, don't we? So what is it that Ramana Maharshi is calling as the mind's own pursuit? The mind's own pursuit is peace, dissolution. But mind does not go about pursuing peace in an honest or unbiased way, I am saying. The mind already has notions. The mind wants peace. The notion is, I will get peace through the world. The mind wants dissolution. The notion is, I will get dissolution through my imaginations or dreams. So what then dhyan is? If dhyan is about the mind actively entering its own pursuit, please. Ramana Maharshi is saying, dhyan is the mind actively engaged in its own pursuit. What is it that the mind wants? Peace. And the mind is saying, I'll get peace through that thing on the road. There is something on the road. The mind wants peace. But the mind wants peace through that thing on the road. Dhyan is to have the mind actively pursue its own thing. So what should now the mind do with respect to that thing on the road? Probe it. The mind should say, I want peace. But somehow I feel that I'll get peace through that thing on the road. Right? And I am deeply committed to that notion, as we all are. Aren't we committed to our notions and prejudices? We don't even call them prejudices. We call them as truths. Strange word. Truths. Just as somebody is asking here about the various kinds of dhyans. Just as there can be various kinds of dhyans, so probably there can be multifarious truths. Syncretic truths. Accommodative truths. Personal truths. That's what the mind believes in. I believe that I can get peace through that thing on the road, My neighbor believes that he can get peace through that thing in the sky. To each his own. He has his own truth. I have my own truth. Fine. You keep your truth. But at least probe it. That's dhyan. That's dhyan. Now, when must dhyan be practiced? Somebody is asking Ramana Maharshi here, with eyes open or when the eyes are closed. Ramana Maharshi is saying, with eyes open and with eyes closed. Which means, at what particular time? All the time. Look at the question. All the time the eyes are open, they are open, not just casually or randomly or perfunctorily. The eyes are open quite purposefully, meaningfully. The eyes are not just functioning as an instrument. The eyes are not merely doing some perfunctory duty. The eyes are active chasers of meaning. Are you getting it? You don't just look, you look for something, don't you? A camera just looks. We look for something. The eyes are active chasers of meaning. And when the eyes are closed, that sixth sense called the mind is the active chaser of meaning. It doesn't merely think, it thinks to conclude. It thinks to conclude. And the conclusion is to bring about a change in the state of the thinker. A machine too concludes. A computer can conclude. But no conclusion brings about a change in the internal state of the one concluding. Look at a computer. Feed it a problem. A tremendous problem. It can probably come to a conclusion within 10 minutes, 20 minutes. If the problem is humongous, maybe the computer itself can take 2 days or 2 weeks to come to a conclusion. But whether it takes 2 seconds, 2 nanoseconds, or 2 months to conclude, no conclusion is going to cause a change in the internal condition of the computer, because the computer has no internal condition at all. The computer does not have a psyche. The computer is just a machine. It has no psyche. Therefore, nothing psychological about the computer. When we think, we don't just think. We think so that our psychological condition can improve. Do you understand this? Do you understand this? That's why when your thinking takes you nowhere, you feel disturbed. Whereas, if you run an unending, iterative loop in a computer, will the computer feel disturbed? Will it feel disturbed? It may heat up. The machine might hang. But it will not get disturbed. Or will it? No. So please understand that whatever man does is never random or casual or purely functional. Every single step that we take, every single breath that we take is deeply imbued with a meaning. Man is a pursuer of meaning. We want something, and for the sake of that thing do we live. We want something, for the sake of that thing do we wake up each morning. We want something, for the sake of that thing do these eyes keep looking hither and thither. We don't just do anything. You would be surprised that even the most casual and routine of our daily movements are actually subconsciously quite meaningful. We are such active pursuers of something. And if we are such active pursuers of something, if we are so very deeply committed to that search, then isn't it important that we keep probing whether the search is going rightly, in the right direction? Are you getting it? If we are living to get something, that one particular thing, if every action of ours is to get that one particular thing, if entire life is nothing but a dedication to that pursuit, isn't it incumbent on us that we keep probing whether our daily actions are leading us to that thing? That's dhyan. Is that clear? You exist because you want something. You eat because you want something. What is it that you want? Not taste, not nutrition. Something beyond that. Mere taste and nutrition will not do. Surely you do want taste, you do want nutrition, but you want something far above taste and nutrition. Man eats for that. Animals eat only for nutrition, maybe. When an animal eats and when a man eats, there is a tremendous difference. Animal eats for the body alone. Man eats for both the body and consciousness. Man wants something through the morsel. When an animal moves, when a man moves, there is a tremendous difference. The movement of an animal is just locomotion. The movement of a man is a psychological pursuit. You don't just move. You move because you expect your movement to psychologically take you somewhere. If we are so deeply committed to that something that we want, must we not keep probing whether we are getting that thing through the actions that we are using to get that thing? That's dhyan. Let me caution you in advance that the results of the probe are usually in negative. They must be. In dhyan, you discover that most of what you are doing to get what you want is going waste. That which you want is coming no nearer to you in spite of all your efforts. Once you discover that, it can be highly unsettling, because now you can no more blindly pursue your daily actions, hoping and assuming that they are bringing you nearer to your goal, because they are not. Once you have seen that your actions are not really helping you in the real sense, in the deep sense, then how will you go about your daily routine as you currently do? Therefore, dhyan is not everybody's cup of tea. Therefore, dhyan is dangerous. Therefore, people do not want dhyan. Therefore, people arrange for themselves very, very cheap substitutes to dhyan. Those cheap substitutes to dhyan are majorly the techniques of dhyan. If there is one thing that prevents you from leading a meditative life, it is methods of meditation. Those who follow methods of meditation are much more likely to never ever enter true meditation, because now they have a cool, handy toy to just psychologically entertain themselves with. By this, I no way mean to insinuate that those who devised these methods were ill-meaning people. Those methods were devised to introduce you to meditation, to give you a glimpse of meditation, so that later on, so that very soon rather, you go beyond the method and start leading a meditative life itself. But man is so cunning that that which was devised as a means to enter meditativeness becomes an alternative to meditativeness. Are you getting it? That's the same misconception that Ramana Maharshi is trying to dispel in this little excerpt. Dhyan is either your entire life, from morning to evening, even during sleeping, or it is nothing. Dhyan is not something that you do. Dhyan is not gymming. Dhyan is not tennis. Dhyan is not clubbing. Dhyan is not shopping. Dhyan is no internal bodybuilding. Dhyan is no routine or regimen. Dhyan is not an internal weight loss diet. Dhyan is no ism. Dhyan is something very, very simple, an innocent life. A life that does not want to carry guilt. A life that wants to live cleanly, as we all do. I'm not talking of something distinctively special. Who over here does not want to live a light life? Who enjoys a burdened life? Please tell me. Do you? So that's Dhyan. Your innate urge to live lightly, cleanly, innocently. That's Dhyan. Aren't you living continuously? Then why must Dhyan be episodic? If you are continuously living, why must Dhyan be periodic? Tell me, please. Why do you want to have periods of Dhyan so that you can have then safely long periods of non-Dhyan? So that you can safely say that I have had my quota of Dhyan for the day, now I am free to do as I please. Why must Dhyan ever come to a full stop? But that's the thing with methods. They give you the liberty to come to a point in time when all methods end. You say, I am done for the day. The next bout of meditativeness will come 24 hours later. I call these fits of meditation. They occur once a day or once a week or something. Getting it? So something happens to you when you enter Dhyan. What to do then? Put Dhyan on that which happens to you. Acharya ji, when I am meditative, then strange things happen to me. Probe that strangeness. Meet those things. What else to do? What else is there to be known? Accept that which is within your experiential field. Accept that which is within your sensory domain. What can you probe? Tell me, please. Your entire world is limited to that which is within the field of your senses. And when I say senses, I also mean the imaginative mind, right? That is your entire world, correct? Not merely psychologically, actually scientifically as well. That which is outside the domain of sensory experience does not even exist. That which cannot even be imagined does not exist even in science. So all that can be probed practically is only that which you experience. Probe it. Which means you have to be sharp and careful through life. That's dhyan. How difficult is that? Not at all. How difficult is that? Extremely difficult. Depends on you. Depends on your intention. You really want it, you really love it, you will have it. You don't want it, you'll get excuses. Excuses are abundant. You don't even need to have a fresh excuse. There is an entire stack available. Randomly pick something. Getting it? But Acharya ji, dhyan of the kind that you talk of is so difficult. What will Acharya ji say? Probe the difficulty. If difficulty is what you experience in real dhyan, then probe the difficulty. The dangerous thing with probing is that it reveals that the danger is imaginary. Now next time you cannot use this excuse again. You cannot say that you start experiencing difficulties in dhyan. It has been now revealed, exposed, that those difficulties are all imaginary. And it's a very deliberately terrifying imagination. You are using your own imagination to terrify yourself, so that you don't have to know the reality of your life. This is no fun. I cannot give any other argument. It's no fun living a scared life. Choose. Scared or sacred? Just a little bit of juggling. CA or AC? In alphabet and in life, following the order helps. AC is better. Sacred is better than scared. No? If you face difficulties in living truthfully, meditatively, then you must know that there is stuff in your life that is very dangerous. Dangerous not for somebody else, for you, Baba. you. You're not accountable to anybody else, but aren't you answerable to yourself? Huh? You don't have to point to prove to somebody. You don't have to earn a character certificate. But what fun is it living all shivering and panting, as they say, like a wet cat. Seen a cat wet in the winter rains? How does it look? What do you say about leading an entire life like that cat? Cold and hungry and scared, homeless and lonely. Pretty exciting. Why take that option? Dhyan is nothing exotic, nothing even mystical. It is something very simple, very innocent. Methods are all right, but methods are only for those who do not have the innocence to directly practice dhyan. All methods are kind of crooked, and therefore all methods are only for crooks. You understand crooked? What is crooked? Not straight. This is crooked. This. All right, you want to use a method, use a method. But then the method is to introduce you to wholesome meditativeness. Please come to that as soon as possible. Do not say that you have been practicing this or that method since 2 decades. It's so offensive to hear. It's almost like an expletive on your face.